Merry Christmas, you old hound dog.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas, good brothers and good sisters. Welcome to another Top 5 list, and this year I wanted to take a look at my top 5 favorite animated episodes or specials from the 80s. As always, my lists are in no particular order, but I'm going to start with a team that's number one in my heart. It is the real American hero, G.I. Joe, and there is one Christmas episode in the entire Sunbow run. I thought there would actually be more. Kind of had the feeling that G.I. Joe and a lot of those other 80s cartoons had a Christmas episode every year, but that is not the case. The yuletide episodes are few and far between for the big properties like G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man. But there is one G.I. Joe episode. It's called Cobra Claws Are Coming to Town. And for the most part, it's a big battle episode, but it is set during Christmas, so it kind of feels like Die Hard. It's a big rock'em sock'em action adventure that just happens to be set during Christmas, but that's kind of what makes it special, that this is all happening while it's snowing and there's peace on earth and goodwill to men.
Happy holidays from Wild Weasel, you Christmas turkeys!
In this episode, the Joe team is short-staffed because most of them are away on Christmas holidays, so the guys that are left at the headquarters have a Christmas dinner get-together, and in that scene, Mutt, the dog handler, actually gets up and excuses himself because he's one of those people that doesn't really feel Christmas. He didn't have a great, warm, fuzzy Christmas every year growing up. So he heads out on his own, and it's very, very fleeting. It's not what the whole episode is about, but they do touch on it, that there are some people who, while everyone else is having a great time and a lot of fun, some people really feel lonely during that time. And it was cool that Junkyard was there to cheer him up. And then by the end of the episode, he decides, Christmas might not be all that bad after all, after he just finished destroying millions of dollars worth of, I guess, G.I. Joe equipment that was stolen by Cobra. It's a pretty crazy, zany episode. It involves Cobra getting shrunk down and infiltrating the G.I. Joe headquarters and then getting blown up. And then Polly also gets blown up to huge, not exploded blown up, but increased in size, kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kid. So it makes no sense. The technology is insane, but it goes with the whole Christmas theme. It's goofy. It's kind of in the vein of Once Upon a Joe. And I like those episodes of Joe because they are few and far between. It's not like every single episode was just ridiculous. So I like the zaniness of how Cobra got in there. It was cool to see Cobra in G.I. Joe's vehicles and then G.I. Joe having to use Cobra's vehicles. So I remember as a kid watching this episode, I got the idea, well, we need to swap the vehicles because Cobra stole the Joe vehicles to infiltrate a city to attack it. So it gave a little bit of variance in play. It made it okay for Joes to be driving around in Stingers and flying Rattlers and Cobras to be flying in Sky Strikers. I love Duke pestering Cobra Commander from the backseat of a Sky Striker. Lots of cool little moments in this episode. So if you haven't checked it out in a while and you feel like getting into the Christmas spirit through G.I. Joe, that's definitely one to hit up this Christmas season. Number 2 on the list is He-Man and She-Ra's Christmas special. I love me some Filmation, and the thing that I thought was really cool about this was it was basically Masters of the Universe's swan song in terms of animation. The Secret of the Sword came out shortly before this, introducing She-Ra, and that was a joint team-up movie of Masters of the Universe and She-Ra, Princess of Power, the two crews combining. And then they stopped making Masters of the Universe to focus on She-Ra, so Masters of the Universe never really had its proper final episode. So I guess you could consider Secret of the Sword the final chapter of the Masters of the Universe animated saga, but I like to look at this as the final one, where everybody gets together. Again, it's during Christmas. It's got that Christmas spirit. Even though it's on Eternia, Adam is half human, and they always remind us of that his mother is from the planet Earth. So typical Masters of the Universe and She-Ra style of humor and stakes in this. The stakes aren't very high, but the absolute highlight of this special for me was watching Skeletor basically have a Grinch moment when he's dealing with the kids and the little puppy insisting that he's not nice, he's not a good person, but when he is put in these situations where he can leave a puppy to freeze in the snow or leave the kids to freeze to death, he does the right thing. And that's what I love about the 80s cartoon villains, that even though something like Cobra is supposed to be a world terrorist organization, they don't cross a line. And Skeletor also is supposed to be the evil master of darkness and trying to rule the universe. But when push comes to shove, and Skeletor is pushed quite a few times throughout the cartoon, but I think this episode really shows you that when it comes right down to it, he can't do the absolutely heartless evil thing, at least when it comes to puppies and children. He will do the right thing. He'll be grumpy about it, but he, at his heart, as crazy as that might sound, he's not completely rotten to the core. He will do the right thing around Christmas. So this episode really speaks to the power of Christmas, that it's able to make Skeletor have a little teeny weeny bit of a heart.
Don't worry, Skeletor. Christmas only comes once a year.
Thank goodness.
Number 3 is an episode of The Real Ghostbusters. It's written by J. Michael Straczynski, who Babylon 5 fans will know all about. And he also wrote a bunch of Wheeled Warriors, Jason the Wheeled Warriors episodes. It's called Xmas Marks the Spot from the first season. You can get it on the super cheap Volume 1 Real Ghostbusters animated set, which doesn't include all of the episodes from the first season, but it does have Xmas Marks the Spot. And there are some Real Ghostbusters episodes that feel so much like the movie. They have the same dry wit, goofiness, sharp, smart humor, and this is one of them. It's one of the episodes that really felt like the movie to me, or the first 2 movies. The premise is that the Ghostbusters, after having just finished a job, go through a time warp, not realizing that that's what they went through. And they meet up with Ebenezer Scrooge, who they don't know that's who it is, who is being accosted by 3 ghosts, the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. And not realizing what's happening, the Christmas Carol story, they bust the ghosts, which is absolutely hilarious that you got the Ghostbusters busting these 3 ghosts who are supposed to fix this curmudgeon's life, help him for the better. But that's what they do. Busted makes them feel good. And they don't realize until they go back through the time warp and to their present day that they have obliterated Christmas. That Ebenezer Scrooge has won because he wasn't visited by the 3 ghosts of Christmas. And he has written a book and turned everybody into a humbug because of his power and his influence. So they decide they have to fix what they did, and they split up. Egon goes into the containment unit because he's already deposited the 3 ghosts into the containment unit. And so he puts on this cool suit and devises this plan to go into the containment unit kind of as a ghost himself, sort of a see-through apparition. So while Egon is trying to retrieve the 3 ghosts, the other 3 Ghostbusters head back through the time warp, back in time, to find Ebenezer Scrooge. And they dress up as the ghosts, which is hilarious as well. You got Peter Venkman putting on a wig and having flares on his belt to simulate bright lights. And then the part that made me lose it, I was just literally laughing out loud, is Ray Stantz, who, for people who haven't seen the Real Ghostbusters cartoon, the characters are exactly like they are in the movie. They didn't tweak the characters at all. So just picture Dan Aykroyd's Ray, and that's basically who he is in the cartoon. But the funniest part of the episode for me was Ray Stantz playing charades as one of the ghosts.
First syllable sounds like...
So as the 3 guys miserably fail to portray the ghosts of past, present, and future, Egon is able to retrieve the 3 ghosts, release them, and get them to go to Ebenezer Scrooge and play out the entire Christmas Carol legend and fix Christmas. Like in the G.I. Joe episode, we've got a humbug in this episode. It's Dr. Peter Venkman, who's not a big fan of Christmas, thanks to events from his upbringing with his father. And like the G.I. Joe episode at the end, our humbug decides, Christmas isn't all that bad, in the lazy, laconic voice that only Lorenzo music could do. And speaking of Lorenzo music, number 4 on the list is a Garfield Christmas. I remember taping this and wearing it out because this was before Garfield was a Saturday morning weekly cartoon. We'd only get Garfield specials every once in a while, and Lorenzo Music was the one and only voice of the lovable, adorable, lazy, lasagna-loving cat Garfield. Loved the comics when I was growing up, so being able to see him in motion and actually have a voice to him was fantastic. So this is an episode, again, for the humbugs. There's a lot of joy and merriness in this episode with Garfield's owner, John Arbuckle, and his family. He goes to visit his family on the farm. But this guy can't stand Christmas. He is a humbug. And it's just a great story with fantastic music by Lou Rawls. It's been so long since I've seen this special, but all of the songs came right back to me. Big fan of Lou. And I just enjoyed seeing this humbug begrudgingly melt. And believe it or not, I thought it was a little bit more believable in the Garfield Christmas special than in Ghostbusters or G.I. Joe. Because he's still Garfield at the end. He hasn't decided, hey, this Christmas thing, I love it. But there is an absolutely heartwarming moment between him and John's grandmother. And it really speaks to the power of the Christmas spirit. That it's not about how much you pay for a gift that you give to somebody. It really is the thought that counts. And I think that's what's most important about the Garfield Christmas episode, that the gift that Garfield gives to the grandmother is just, it's so heartwarming, it's so lovely. So I really enjoyed watching that again after all these years, and now being a little bit older than I was the last time I watched this, I was able to appreciate a lot of the more adult themed humor. This felt like a precursor to the Pixar movies to me. A lot of fun for kids, but there's also a lot of more mature humor as well as mature wisdom that I think we can all use.
It's not the giving, it's not the getting, it's the loving.
And number 5 on the list is another Filmation show. It is Brave Star. The episode is titled Tex's Terrible Night, and it's another Christmas Carol type of story. It's one of my favorite plot devices or story styles to take a character who has gone astray and needs redemption. I love redemption in movies and TV shows, and Christmas Carol style of story about this rotten character who's visited by 3 different ghosts in order to wake him up, make him see things from a different perspective. Usually works really well, and I thought it was fantastic in this particular episode. It involves Tex Hex planning to attack Fort Carrium, and Marshal Bravestar and 3030 are out of town, so the 2 biggest defenders aren't around to protect the town. And so the town looks like it's in big trouble on Christmas, but Tex Hex is visited by the shaman, who is kind of a supernatural figure on Bravestar, standing in for the ghosts of the other regular Christmas Carol stories. And Tex is forced to revisit his past, which is a really cool scene because it's actually footage used from the Bravestar movie, The Legend. Stuff we've already seen before, but what's cool is that there's also Tex and Shaman standing there watching these events unfold. So it's kind of like he's doing a commentary on something we've already seen, his perspective of it. And then he revisits one of his lost loves, and we find out that, much like Skeletor, this guy isn't rotten to the core, or he wasn't originally, and his greed, his carrium fever has gotten the best of him. So, again, much like Skeletor, another dag-nasty, rotten to the core stinker of a villain. When push comes to shove, Tex Hex did the right thing. And the really interesting thing about this episode is that typically, animated cartoon specials, especially the ones I've talked about today, they end with the jingle bells and the Christmas spirit, and everyone's fun and happy. This is a melancholy story. It ends kind of on a bittersweet note, and it's very, very powerful. It resonates with me so much more than a lot of the other Christmas specials that I see, because it ends with Tex all by himself. The music is on a down note. The tone and the atmosphere is just somber. It's sullen. And it's Tex acknowledging that he's in big trouble for crossing his boss, Stampede, but he did it for love. And he didn't do it for a current love. He didn't do it because he hopes to get back together and redeem himself with his lost love. She's moved on. It was a selfless act. He did it for her out of love and not expecting anything in return.
Merry Christmas, Ursula. Merry Christmas.
For a cartoon, an 80s cartoon, which is supposed to be just a toy commercial, I thought that's how it's supposed to be. Fantastic character, written really, really well. Something to think about, something that really hits the heart and makes you look at the toy and go, hey, this isn't just a toy. This is a symbol of a guy who he has one little tiny shred of humanity left in him. So that's my top 5 80s animated Christmas episodes. I look forward in future years to be doing more top 5 lists, live action shows, 90s shows. Eric over on Patreon reminded me of a fantastic one from the 90s. The Tick versus Santa is absolutely hilarious. But if you have some favorites that come to mind, whether it's animated or live action, regardless of the decade, feel free to share them in the comments below. Hope you all have a fun and safe holiday season. Thank you so much for all the positivity and the love for what we do here on the channel. It's meant so much to my wife and I. If you're really filled with the Christmas spirit, just remember to hold on to it. It doesn't have to go away on December the 26th. You can feel that way in February or March or June. It's not about Christmas lights. It's not about carols. It's not about presents or Santa. It's about peace on earth, goodwill to others. So let's just all treat each other with respect, with manners, and with love. So happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Joyeux Noël, Happy Hanukkah, and of course, Nerdmas Day.